Let's get some reaction here from Michael O'Hanlon, a senior fellow of foreign policy at the Brookings Institution. Michael, there's a headline on the Washington Post here. I don't know if it's new or not, but it says, Trump appears ready to attack Iran as U.S. strike force takes shape. It may just be noting what we know, which is that there's a bunch of hardware out there, an historic amount of hardware out there, or it might suggest that they're maybe closer to making a decision than we thought. What's your take, Michael?
I think Trump clearly is trying to create as much negotiating leverage as he can. And I think he would settle for a deal that left Iran doing some of the things we don't like ballistic missile development, as long as he can get a permanent end to the nuclear program, which is a reasonable way to think about the situation. But of course, it does beg the question, if Iran refuses that kind of goal, as they have promised they will continue to refuse, then do we really think a military strike can be the end of it and can be effective in a way that changes the situation to our benefit? I'm less clear on that. This is a risky proposition. And just because in recent times Iran hasn't been able to swing back or hit back that hard after American and Israeli strikes of the last couple of years doesn't mean they'll keep doing the same thing. So I'm not opposed to this policy, but I would put up a big warning flag that we may not know the consequences if we strike again.
Michael, walk me through the first part of what you just talked about, because I'd like to be able to evaluate it in terms of, would the hardline Iranian government really go for that? But what does that deal look like?
Well, the deal looks like a permanent end to enrichment, which means they have to get rid of the 60% U-235 they've already got. We're not sure they can even access it right now, but they've got several hundred pounds of that, enough for, at least 10 nuclear weapons, we think. And then they have to permanently give up centrifuges. And of course, we've damaged a lot of the centrifuges. We would have to have access to the sites where they used to be and the ability to go in the future to places where we suspect they may be trying to do things illicitly, with no guarantee we would actually find them. But that's the best we could do at trying to create a robust, watertight deal on the nuclear weapons front. And I think, it builds on previous kinds of inspection regimes where we didn't let them, or where they agreed not to enrich above a certain percent and then just kept pushing that percent up higher and higher. But we could have the same kind of access to verify they didn't have any centrifuges at all.
So it's a deal to get rid of the nuclear weapons and the monitoring that they have been resistant to over the years. Michael, what happens to the flow of oil from Iran during this process of what's happening right now?
First, just to clarify, as you well know, we don't think they have any nuclear weapons, and we don't think they ever have had nuclear weapons. It's the material, it's the highly enriched uranium that would be the core, as well as the centrifuges, and then maybe some research and testing capability to look at things like the high explosive in a nuclear weapon that you would need to perfect before having a reliable bomb. In terms of oil, I think the big question is, would Iran start trying to shut down the Strait of Hormuz? And a lot of people have said, well, why would they do that when it takes money out of their own pocket? But at a certain point, if Iran is facing enough punishment, they may decide that they should play that card. And especially if it's a card they can play and then stop playing. In other words, try to get us to promise not to commit future attacks or to establish a form of deterrence against the future attack. They can start using mines, sinking the occasional ship, just causing mayhem in the region. We might retaliate, but it's not clear we can really stop them from interfering with the oil trade, given the geography. And then Iran could agree that once we back off our military strikes, they'll back off the attacks in the Strait of Hormuz. That's one big option they have. Another big option is traditional truck bombing and car bombing and assassination kind of targeting that they've done historically and could escalate again here in the future. So I don't necessarily think they will be content just to fire a bunch of drones back at Israel and Jordan and American military bases. They may escalate in an asymmetric way.